Looks like True Idaho News is up. It looks like Shane Talks Politics is up. They're just waiting for one more and streaming. Hey, everybody. You are joining us a little bit differently this time. I'm Shane Klaas with Shane Talks Politics, and
I'm Daniel Bobinski, founder of True Idaho News.
we've got something special going on today, and you're going to see a lot more of the two of us together doing this. But Daniel Bobinski, I'm going to let you make the big announcement.
Make the big announcement. Okay, so those of you who've been following Shane on Shane Talks Politics, hi, how are you? Shane has been on my show multiple times. He's been a guest on the podcast that we've done for True Idaho News. He's been in the studio with me when I had my radio show, Keep the Republic. And so those of you who may be familiar with True Idaho News, I started this when I got really tired of looking at KTVB and the Idaho Statesman and how left-wing they are. They're just shills for the leftists. No, yes, they are. So, and I said to my wife one day, I said, we need some True Idaho News. And it was like, duh, right there. We need to start a website, True Idaho News. So I did. I started it. And I had grandiose visions for what I wanted to do with it. But God has a way of saying, no, Daniel, I want you to do this instead. And he actually took me out of my TV show. He took me out of my radio show. It was just an interesting, very turn of events in that how God moved me. But I didn't want to get rid of True Idaho News because it's a vital avenue for people to find out what's really going on from a conservative perspective, which I would also say is a truthful perspective, because we don't do lies. And then we try to stay objective as possible. In fact, that's one of the huge compliments I always got, Shane, was how they said, "Oh, you're not biased," and I said, "Oh, I'm very biased. I'm a strong conservative constitutional Christian guy. I'm very biased." I said, "What I'm not is throwing ad hominem attacks out there. I stay objective about the news. I don't get personal. It's just this is the news." And that was the standard that I held to. I really valued those compliments. But as I said, God took me out of my TV show. He took me out of my radio show. And then I said, you know what? I want to get out of this True Idaho News and go back into what God's calling me to do. But I don't want to close this down. So I got to thinking, who can I contact about taking over True Idaho News? And I looked at all the guests that I've had locally and whatnot. And Shane stood out by far. Shane and I have, I think, a good rapport when we get on the air. We get to talking. We have very similar mindsets. We have had some long phone conversations discussing our views and our values. And I thought, you know what? If anybody should take over True Idaho News, it should be Shane. And so I offered it to him. And you said?
I said yes.
You prayed about it.
Mentioned that that coming from Daniel Bobinski, that is a great compliment, and I'm very humbled, and I have a great sense of responsibility to carry on the legacy with True Idaho News that you started.
Well, thank you, sir. I will still be around, as you said at the beginning of the podcast here. We've been talking about doing this live stream thing at least once a week or so. I think I can afford that much time. And just to discuss what's going on in the state and what people need to be made aware of. So with that, I just want to make the official announcement that Shane Klaas is taking over True Idaho News. Round of applause.
I need the little button there for the round of applause. So for those of you that have been followers of True Idaho News and Daniel Bobinski, you're not going to see a whole lot of changes on that side. My Shane Talks Politics is going to continue, at least for now, as a separate entity with what we're doing there. I want to, and I'm very opinionated on Shane Talks Politics, and probably I try to stay away from the ad hominems, but I do get a little passionate. I think is the best word to say sometimes with that side. And honestly, I don't want that to bleed over to the True Idaho News side. I want it to stay as the source of true, unbiased Idaho news. And I say unbiased. It will always have. I mean, I'm a conservative. Daniel knows that. Our conversations are always very conservative, and so you're going to see it coming from the conservative point of view when I'm speaking. But we are going to open the door for some of our legislature to be able to post directly to you. That's something that I'm dedicated to doing. I think that across the state, we really need a platform to get the information out, not just on True Idaho News, but to all of the conservatives. We need to have a way to conservative news sources in Idaho, a way to get the news directly to them faster. And so that we can get in front of it, because as Daniel and I have spoken about quite a bit, and we'll share more of this, I'm sure, as time moves forward. But there is a war in Idaho. We know that there's one on the national side, but there is a war in Idaho, and there is a war for lack of better terms, for control of our legislature. And it's not just the Democrats that are trying to take control of it, and it's not just unfortunately, the establishment that's trying to take control over it. But there are factions inside that on the conservative side, that there's a bit of a battle going on for the state. And we're not going to get much into that today, I don't think. I think we will hint on that a little bit. I do have an article that I want to talk about a little bit. But we really... you need to know, those listeners that are on Shane Talks Politics, that are on True Idaho News, and all the other channels that this is streaming to right now. I think there's 7 or 8 of them. That we're not safe. And we thought we were making a lot of headway in the conservative movement, and we were, but unfortunately, that is not the case right now. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I just want to welcome everybody from the True Idaho News platform. And I am excited about the future. Daniel is going to be working very closely with me still as we're making this transition, and hopefully we continue to have him for years to come, still lending his opinions and his perspective on what's going on.
Yeah. So you and I had talked, and so I will stay on as the what did you say, founder/editor emeritus.
Yes.
So I will still be contributing articles and stuff and opinion pieces to True Idaho News, just because I can't keep my mouth shut.
I think the best way to explain this transition is going to be more of the management side of things behind the scenes that's going to free Daniel up to do his God's work in other places, and yet we'll still see a lot of the same things happening with it. So into it, and really to try to expand that and get that voice out further.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great idea. Thanks.
So on that, we had a fun idea today, and it is to kind of go through some news headlines. And Daniel, I want you to take the lead on this. We have some different headlines around, and we're going to kind of talk about those. Got a rapid fire, I think, is the terminology that we were using.
Yeah, we don't want to spend 16 minutes belaboring a point, but so kind of fly through the news headlines, and there's Idaho-centric news and there's national news, and we'll probably touch on some of both. But on the international level, Mr. Klaus Schwab, which is everybody's favorite James Bond villain, who has been running the World Economic Forum, an unelected, talk about people complaining about unelected positions. Here's an organization that started with a college professor, Klaus Schwab, whose father was heavily involved in all sorts of weird stuff. But this guy decides to start this World Economic Forum. And he has openly stated that with they've got a school that they have, the New World Leaders or Young Global Leaders School, which some of our elected representatives have gone through. And so they've been indoctrinated into this mindset of globalism. Klaus Schwab, this is the guy who said, "You will own nothing and be happy." He's resigned from the World Economic Forum abruptly. There was supposed to be a transition period in place. He's now resigned. And there was an article in the Wall Street Journal that said that he resigned. What's the reason? Well, he's been accused of using funds from the World Economic Forum for personal use. One of the accusations is that he's told his little minions to go withdraw some money, some cash money out of their ATMs, and then give it to him, and then he hires personal masseuses when he's in hotel rooms, and who knows what goes on there. And then there's the wife of Klaus Schwab having, because she's apparently on the board or something, so she goes on these very big, luxurious vacations and then has an ad hoc board meeting so she can write it off on her taxes. But she's these are the accusations. Now, I will, in his defense, in her defense, I should say, I will say that my tax guy, my CPA told me, he says, look, you're required, and when we have a corporation, to have an annual business meeting. There is no requirement in the law as to where you have that. You can have that in Hawaii. And I've actually done that. Okay. And so right off the trip. But that's a one-time meeting once a year that I do. But people making the accusations that, and by the way, I haven't done that in over a decade. So no, I'm not being guilty of this. But his wife was doing this on a regular basis. And this was the accusation why he quit. And of course, his lawyers are denying it. But what's really scary to me, Shane, is his replacement is the former CEO of Nestle, who actually looks more like a Bond villain than Klaus Schwab does, which is scary because Klaus Schwab already does look like a Bond villain. But this is the guy from Nestle who a couple of years ago said that we do not have the right to free water. That's scary when someone with that mentality is now in charge of the World Economic Forum. Your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, why in the world does Klaus Schwab need to embezzle money? I mean, I thought he was already a multi-billionaire and has plenty of funds of his own. Maybe that's how he got there. I don't know. But I mean, that's the first thought that hit me is why in the world would he even do that? But I guess evil people will do evil deeds. And they say this about sometimes people who were stealing things. A lot of them they have plenty of money. They don't need to steal. They just have this personal problem with stealing. So maybe that's what's going on there. I don't know. It doesn't hurt my feelings at all to see Klaus Schwab go away. But we knew this was coming, but this was my fear. The left of the world and the evil people never seem to replace themselves with anybody that was better. They always get worse. And,
well, I think that's an end time prediction in Scripture, by the way.
Yes, it is. Yeah. They always just get worse and worse and worse. So that's not surprising. I think this guy from Nestle is absolutely horrible, and that just feeds right into it. You will own nothing and be happy. Well, I got news for you. I'm going to own plenty of things, and some of those things jive with our Second Amendment, and I think a lot of people in the United States have that same feeling. So bring it on and see what happens, because I think that would be the ultimate, I won't say it, but the term FAFO, I think that would be the ultimate FAFO.
There you go.
So,
all right, so that's some national news. You said you had something local to talk about.
I do. I'm going to bring this up, and first of all, So this is from my X page. Attorney General Raul Labrador posted this up. And this was his response to what is happening in Idaho. I probably ought to give just a little bit of a background before I get too much into the post that he made. So I'm sure most of you have already heard this if you've been paying attention in Idaho. Idaho legislature put forth a bill which passed and was signed by the governor, stating that they will not be flying any political flags on government buildings. And Mayor McClean, Mayor McClean, habits, Daniel habits, but she put the pride flag up. Now, recently, there was a gentleman that went and got a ladder on Easter Sunday morning and climbed up the ladder and put a bag over the flag and raised up a different flag. Daniel, help me with the name of that flag. That
was actually a flag from the state of Maine back in the Revolutionary War times. It's called the Appeal to Heaven flag.
Thank you.
And George Washington used that flag. It was a popular flag at the time and still is. Now, the state of Maine actually still has a version of that flag around. They just took the words off of it, but they still kept the pine tree.
For the pine tree, yep. And so, interestingly enough, that flag, because that was part of a state flag and so on, it does not violate the Idaho statute.
True.
So anyhow, he raised a flag that does not violate the Idaho statute, but McClean is kind of flying this, not kind of, just flagrantly flying the flag in the face of the Idaho legislature, the governor, and our attorney general, and the sheriff, and all of the law enforcement who wants to do something about this. I don't know. Well, I can't say our governor. I don't think he's out. He's come out, as far as I know. I don't think he's come out and said anything about it. But
No.
our attorney general has, and the sheriff is frustrated that the legislature didn't put any teeth into it. I believe this is a bill that was brought forth by Heather Scott, who's was a member of the Idaho Freedom Caucus. There's a little bit of a battle over the Freedom Caucus going on right now. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But they didn't put it, and there are a lot of bills were passed this last session and have in the past that have no teeth. And so I'll read Attorney General's response. He's getting a lot of pressure right now to do something about it. I want to read his response first, and then we can kind of talk about the problem with the teeth.
But before you do that, just as a heads up, he wrote her a letter that got publicized and asking her to respect it. And she's waving more than the flag. She's waving a certain index, not an index finger, but the finger next to your index finger. She's waving back at the state.
Yes.
And so there's been a call, I guess it was Colton Boyle up north, an attorney, who pointed out that there's a statute in Idaho code that says if you don't follow code, you can be cited with a misdemeanor. And so that now people are calling for the attorney general to use that statute to cite the mayor. And this is his response to that call out.
Yes. So he said, I'm just going to read it. Many Idahoans are justifiably outraged by the city of Boise's decision to fly two flags on government property that appear to violate state law. I hear you, and you are absolutely right to call this out, demand answers, and hold your leaders accountable. That's how a government earns the trust of its people. Some have criticized me for not using Idaho's criminal statutes to act against the mayor of Boise. I want to be clear and directly address those concerns and explain why the law does not allow for criminal prosecution in this situation. I've heard calls to invoke Idaho Code 18-315. That statute applies only when a public official willfully fails to perform a duty clearly assigned by law. House Bill 96, which governs the display of flags on government property, limits what flags may be flown, but it does not assign enforcement authority to any specific public official. Without that, 18-315 does not apply. Others have pointed to House Bill 6, which takes effect July 1st, 2025. While it expands the Attorney General's investigative authority over city officials, it applies solely to violations of state criminal law. House Bill 96 does not create a criminal offense for flying an unauthorized flag, nor does any other Idaho statute cover this conduct. So, House Bill 6 will not apply. He goes on to say, let me be perfectly clear. I will not follow the reckless partisan examples set by the New York Attorney General in her political pursuit of President Trump. I will not weaponize the law. My duty is to enforce Idaho's laws as they are written, not as some might wish them to be. The bottom line is this. I cannot prosecute conduct that is not a crime, and I will not distort or stretch Idaho law to invent one. What I can do and am actively doing is reviewing every available civil legal option under Idaho law in response to this situation. I will always stand up for the Constitution for Idaho and for the laws passed by our legislature, but I will do so with integrity, impartiality, and an unwavering commitment to the rule of law. I am grateful that Idahoans care deeply about our values and keep the integrity of our government, keep demanding accountability, keep insisting on transparency, and I strongly encourage you to make your voices heard directly to the mayor of Boise, because she needs to hear from you. So that is his response. Daniel?
I think it's an excellent response. I think he's very forthcoming in his opinions. He's very communicative. I love that about him, that he is very open about talking on social media platforms to us, the Idahoans. We have a governor right now who is, I don't know, a puppet. And he's got really good handlers. They know how to, when his PR is not going so well, they post a bunch of pictures of him wearing cowboy hats and whatnot, but he's a horrible governor as far as I'm concerned, as far as being proactive about Idahoan values.
Yes.
I'm really looking forward to Raul Labrador running for governor again and winning because I think he'll be much more proactive as a governor. He's already showing that as Attorney General.
Yes. So I will admit, on X, there were a lot of people that were being critical of Labrador for not doing anything about this, and I was one of them who jumped in to critique. Yes, why aren't we doing anything about this? We elected you to do this. I've been very supportive of Labrador, which I said in my post. I said I have been very happy with our selection of him, but this is an issue that needs to be dealt with. And so I was very happy to see this response because it wasn't just hey guys, you're being critical of me, or he didn't just ignore the public. He came out and he wrote this and gave an explanation very clear as to why these statutes don't apply. And I know it's easy to get caught up in it, and it happens to me to start looking at some of the posts, and they come from very reputable people who you know and you trust, and they cite these codes as these are ways to do it. But at the end of the day, everybody, including myself, sometimes wants to be a keyboard attorney, but he is an attorney, and he is the Attorney General of Idaho. So that's why we have him to look at the law and to interpret that law and to enforce the law, not our wishes and desires. Which my wishes and desires would be that she be treated the way any of the rest of us would be treated if we break the law. But I think the real problem here is our legislature likes to pass, many in our legislature, I should say, likes to pass bills not because they have any teeth, not because they're going to do anything, but so that they can come out in the primaries and say, look at all the bills that I passed. I passed a bill to do this. I passed a bill to do this. I passed a bill to do this. And I passed a bill to do this. And all 65 of these bills that they're going to come out and tout. And many of those are just nothing more than showboat bills. They have no teeth. They have no enforcement authority. And they know that if they give it any teeth, that either somebody in that legislature will come out against it because they don't want to see any teeth in it. They want the showboat, but they don't want to really see anybody arrested. They don't want to see anybody charged. And they know that if they give it teeth, it's not going to go anywhere. Which my response to that is then give it some teeth and let it get voted down and see what happens. But see, this is what happens behind closed doors. And a lot of bills, good bills, end up in desk drawers because they know that they know how it's going to get voted on. They know how they have to vote on it, but they don't want the transparency on how their vote is, so they just stick it in a desk drawer. Or they pass a bill like this that has no teeth. And we have another one of those that I think Christy Zito was the original person to pen the bill. But because of the games that are being played in our legislature right now, several of our legislature have been told that if your name's on a bill, it's not going to go anywhere. So they ripped her name off of it and put a bill out there that same thing with teachers and flying flags. And it's another bill that has absolutely no teeth to it. And it's another showboat bill. And I think the real problem is we need to stop these showboat bills and actually do something.
My first thought, and you talk about that, if your name's on a bill as a co-sponsor or a sponsor, it's not even going to get a hearing, is blatantly, and I can't underscore this strongly enough, blatantly junior high school BS.
Yes.
And I make no apologies for saying that. That is junior high school game playing baloney that has no place in a mature legislature.
Amen.
And yet we have people in our legislature playing these stupid, childish games of power trips. And they say, well, this is how it works. It's like, no, it's not how it works. It's how you choose to work it. So it's not how it works. Because you set the pace, you set the rules, you set the policies, you set the procedures. You can stand up and be a mature individual and let the bill be heard, let it be discussed on its merit. Who cares who brings it up and whose name's on it? Does the bill have merit or not? And that's what needs to be discussed. And it irritates the living daylights out of me that we have people elected in our Idaho State House that play these childish games.
And it's happening a lot right now with this battle over the Idaho Freedom Caucus. And I don't say this as an ad hominem. I say this as all truth. That right now the Idaho Freedom Caucus is the fake Freedom Caucus because the National Freedom Caucus does not want them to be carrying that name. anymore. They're fighting it down. So it's not truly the part of the
Well,
Freedom Caucus.
there are two Freedom Caucuses operating right now. One of them has the authorization of the national level. One of them broke away and decided that they were going to have their own Freedom Caucus. The real hard part about this, Shane, is I have good friends on both sides of that issue.
I do too.
And
But
it
I'm very
really, it's
disappointed in
sad.
some of them on the wrong side.
Yes, I really am. It goes back to what I said before. It's childish. It is game playing. It's like get together, talk about it. And I'll say this, and gives me an opportunity to say, I've been wanting to write about this and I haven't had the time. I'll now talk about it. When you have people who are Christians and they're using that, by the way, as a badge of honor. I'm a believer, blah, blah, blah. And they now have an issue with somebody. When you look at a Christian way of doing things, when you have aught against somebody, scripture is very clear. You take that to that person one-on-one and you discuss it with them. And if it doesn't get resolved, then you bring to your liking, then you bring two or three others and you have another conversation with two or three others. And if that doesn't resolve, then you take it public.
Amen.
I was watching my X feed and I saw a former legislator up north, openly slamming, criticizing, ad hominem attacks against a conservative legislator for aligning with some organization. And I happen to know both of them are believers. So what I did was I called the person who was being attacked and I said, did this person up north contact you before going public with this? And this person was totally unaware that they were being slammed publicly.
Oh boy.
Had no contact, no nothing. And I thought, look, if you are going to call yourself a Christian and stand on that platform, then by God, act on Christian principles and do what you say you do. Contact that person first, try to work it out. If that doesn't work, take two or three more. If that doesn't work, then take it public. Fine. But none of that happened.
Well,
And it irritates the living daylights out of me that here we have these people who will claim the name of Christian, but yet not follow scripture.
yep. And that is, I want to choose my words wisely here, so because this is such a touchy subject.
Mhm.
But I believe that the outward actions show the inward spirit. And so if you are going to outwardly profess with your mouth that you are a Christian, we know a tree by its fruit. And when you see these types of things taking place, this kind of underhandedness, these types of just malicious attacks, these types of just non-Christian activity taking place,
Mhm.
then you can know a tree by its fruit, and I will let God answer that one with his own words. You will know a tree by its fruit. And so we need to be watching this very carefully and just judging. Are they acting like a Christian? Because that's who their handler is. Your handler is God or Satan. And
Yeah, there's no in
I
between.
think some of these people need to check up from the neck up, and they need to take a look in the mirror and ask, what does my fruit look like? Because they may believe that they're doing the right thing, but that is the great deceiver. Look at your actions, look at how you're handling things, and do a little bit do a lot of self-evaluation, which I've had to do. Those who have been following me over since COVID, there was I was acting in self very much. God was very much touching me and trying to get a hold of me and to point me in the direction, and used me as a tool even when I was being rebellious. But there came a day when I had to ask myself, who's my handler? Who's really in the driver's seat? Who's in control? And it's tough for us sometimes, especially when people are stepping on our rights, when people are doing wrong towards us, to get angry and want to do something about that. And that's good. We should do something about that. But we should do something about that as a tool of Christ, not as just a tool.
Mm.
So,
Yeah. Well, what also saddens me on this whole issue is that this Freedom Caucus has split. And there's one group that continues to meet at the Capitol in the morning when session's going on, and they have a prayer time. And then the other group has decided to stop participating in that prayer time.
hmm
And it's this group that is separated out that is the one making the ad hominem attacks against the people who are continuing to do that. I don't hear that from them. I don't hear the ad hominem attacks coming from them. I hear it coming from the other group, the Brickwick. And now, for those of you who might be watching, listening, say, well, what are you guys going off on this Christianity stuff? This is government, it's separate. I want to call your attention to this book, Original Intent. This is a book that, as you can see, I've got a lot of markers in. And this was one of the few books that has a permanent place on my desk. And I strongly recommend getting this book and reading it because it will show you from congressional record when this country was being founded, the conversations that went on. And most people do not even know that you had to be a Christian to hold public office. I'm going to read this little bit from the Tennessee Constitution when Tennessee became a state in 1796. Was created with the help of constitutional signer William Blount. So this is a guy who actually signed the U.S. Constitution, who helped create the Tennessee Constitution. Article, this is interesting. Article number 8, Section 2. No person who denies the being of God or a future state of rewards or punishments shall hold any office in the civil department of this state. That was in the Tennessee State Constitution. You had to acknowledge the existence of God and the existence of a future state of reward and punishments. Okay, that was Section 8 of the Constitution, Article 8. Article 11 of the same Constitution, ready for this? No religious test shall ever be required as a qualification of any office or public trust in the state. Now that seems counterintuitive. That seems like it's an oxymoron. Well, Article 8 says that you have to believe in God, and Article 11 says there's no religious test. Doesn't that seem contradictory? This is where one will learn from this book that the word religion at the time of the country's founding was a synonym for Christian denomination. So, Shane, if I asked you what religion are you, I'm not asking you, are you a Muslim or a Buddhist or a Christian? I'm asking you, are you a Presbyterian, a Congregationalist, a Baptist? What are you? What Christian denomination are you? That was what the word religion meant at the founding of the country, as evidenced by the Tennessee State Constitution.
That's absolutely right.
So in other words, you have to believe in God. You have to hold public, if you're going to hold public office, you have to believe in God and the state of future rewards and punishments. But we're not going to test you, Article 11, as to whether you're a Baptist or a Congregationalist or whatever. You just have to believe this. There's no test of denomination. That's what is meant. So when you have people today saying no religious test, it's taking it out of context. And I bet you if we went to Raul Labrador, he would read the same thing.
I bet he would too. And I'll say this: I'm sure there's some folks out there getting their feathers ruffled up a little bit as they're hearing this and they're watching this. And I'm not gonna make a statement. I'm gonna ask a question. This is how our country was founded. Our country has been very successful, wildly successful, a shining beacon throughout the entire world. Nobody really looks somewhere else and says, I wish my country was more like that than the United States of America. So with that statement being the truth, that's how we started. You've seen where our country has gone over the last 50, 60, 70 years, especially in the last 10 years. What has been rampant in the last decade?
The last decade?
The LGBTQ, ABCDEFG movement, okay, hedonism, lawlessness, pretty much everything that is contrary to the Bible has been rampant. And you've seen where our country has gone over the last 10 years. Let me ask you this: which country would you prefer to live in? And you've seen the change from 2016 to now, at least I have, in Trump, and how he's conducting himself and how he's managing himself since the shooting.
Hmm.
And we've seen a return to Christian values, a very strong. I believe that he already was a Christian. I think when you have a brush with death, suddenly you become a Christian. Can often happen as he went through, and I really truly honestly have seen that change in him and the direction he's trying to take our country right now. So you can live in a country that doesn't have any concerns about whether or not your elected officials are Christians or not, whether they believe in God or not, and you've seen where that's taken our country. Do you want to continue down this path, or do you want to go down the path that we used to be and get back to what the Christian principles of our nation used to be in? I personally want to go back. Moving
There's a
forward on this train is a dead end, and it's a dead end for our nation as we know it. And we have a very short period of time to correct that path.
very short, very short period of time. I think we got 3 years. It's
Mm-hmm.
my guess. And so, yeah, I think a couple things on this. One is Trump has been reelected as president, and a lot of people are going, "Oh, thank God," and they sit back and they kind of, okay, and now I can trust the plan. And I'm going, next person who says trust the plan to my face, I might slap them because I'm not going to trust the plan. This government was bottom up. It was designed to be a bottom up. It flipped the coin. Everything, all governments up until the time of the founding of our country were top down, whether it's a king or a emir or a sultan or something. So it's always top down, a pharaoh, top down government, always. Our nation flipped it around, made it bottom up. And so when I hear people say trust the plan, no, don't trust the plan. Listen to the plan, examine the plan, evaluate the plan. And this leads me to part two. I'm very glad Trump got reelected because if we had the alternative, it would have been the train was already going over the cliff. It would have been heading straight down. Um, he's pulling the train back off the cliff. But let me also offer this too. I really like an overwhelming amount of what Trump is doing. But because I maintain the mindset of evaluate the plan, don't just trust the plan, but evaluate it, I get a lot of flack from people because there are some things that Trump is doing that I disagree with.
Sure.
I made that comment on one of my social media platforms, and someone said, "You wouldn't know truth if it hits you in the." Okay. And I'm thinking, okay, what we have here is a Trumpophile who worships the ground Trump walks on. And there are people that I know and I'm friends with who have that mindset that anything Trump does is gold. It's
It's
like,
the
no,
gospel.
he's a human being. He's fallible. He's going to make mistakes. In his first week in office, he brings out Larry Ellis and announces some big program that the government is investing in AI. And I'm thinking, holy cow, Trump, do you realize what you're doing? Do you know who Larry Ellison is? This guy is serving not God. He's not serving. I mean, this is the guy who took over the island of Lanai in Hawaii. He bought the whole island. He owns like 98% of the island now. And he's a megalomaniac.
Hmm.
And yet Trump has brought him into the system. And I'm going, do not do this.
You know, Trump
Think about
seems
the
to
ripple
his
effects.
first term, he had a lot worse problem with this than he has this time around, but he still has a
Yes.
problem with his endorsements. Can
Yeah.
be absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
And the people that he surrounds himself with are at times in his first administration, most of them were terrible. I hate to say he surrounded himself with some scary people, and I think he learned from that. But then you see things like this, and you're like, what are you doing?
Right.
I completely agree. I think this takes you back to another biblical principle: study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not even supposed to listen to your pastor without balancing against truth, and so much less our president.
Yeah, I facilitate a Bible study every Sunday morning, and the thing I always tell the people who attend is do not believe anything I say.
Mm-hmm.
Take notes, go back to the word and study it for yourself. Be like the Bereans, right? They were more noble than the Thessalonians because they studied, they heard eagerly the words from Paul, and then they went home that night and they looked up in the scripture to see if what he was saying was true. And I say the same thing. Do not trust anything I say. Go research it for yourself. We should have the same attitude towards Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I saw this morning a video, Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, bragging about building the military up. And I'm thinking, okay, that's good. We needed that. But then he's also bragging about how we now have $1 trillion budget. I'm going, we're bragging about that?
I remember when that $1 trillion mark was something that we just didn't dare do anything to go over that $1 trillion budget mark, and the national debt. It seemed like that was the ceiling, was the trillion. We're not going to go over a trillion. The first person to go over a trillion was going to get burned at the stake, and look where we are today.
Well, it's Trump's desire. The guy's got an ego the size of Gibraltar, right? And he wants to be the first at a lot of things, which is fine. But to be the first, they're bragging, he's the first guy to have $1 trillion budget. It's like, that's not something to brag about.
No, not a bit, not a bit. So you had a couple more articles that we had talked about.
Well, it kind of ties in. One of the national stories that I was wanting to discuss, international stories, was Mike Pompeo, who was formerly, I believe, chief of staff for Trump or secretary of something, maybe secretary of state. I forget. He was up in the Trump administration's first term. I've slept since then, so I can't remember which office he held. But he is now advocating for all sorts of globalist stuff, and he's now working in Ukraine, making 50,000, 100,000 bucks a month, whatever, as this advisor. Trump wisely pulled his security clearance. But I just want to point out, this was, as you just said, Trump made a lot of mistakes in his first term because he was new. He wanted to drain the swamp. He did not have any clue how deep or how broad the swamp is and was and is.
Because he's not a politician.
Right. But now that he's been in, as you say, and I forget, maybe it was Pascal who's quoted as saying, you cannot know a situation while you're in it. You have to get out of it and look back and be able to see it. I think that's what happened, right? He was in it, realized he was way in over his head. The deep state was much deeper than he thought. He went back, regrouped, planned. You knows what happened in the first 100 days? He just slam, did a lot of great things, wisely so. But in that first term, he had brought in what he assumed to be safe politicians. Pompeo, he thought was a safe guy, but as we're seeing, Pompeo is a globalist, just like a lot of the people. He's got sucked into the system, and now I just bring it up to say, don't trust somebody just because they say they're a conservative.
Yeah. To your point that you can't know a situation until you're in it. A lot of criticism is going out towards towards Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and Bondi, which I truly understand the criticism there. But you need to understand, it's real easy on the outside to look in and say, why aren't you doing a better job? You should do better than this. You said you were going to come in and immediately make changes. Now, hold on, folks. You don't know how bad it is until you're thrown in there.
Mm-hmm.
And
how deep it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And just how deep it goes, how many people are going to be trying to hold it up. And they have a lot of work to do. If you've ever started a new job as a manager and you didn't work for the company, but you came from the outside, I've had this happen. So I understand that feeling. I came into a company with all sorts of grandiose ideas and I was going to get them done right out of the gate. It took me 6 months because I had to weed out the people who wanted to stop me. It was a company that we had installers, and the installers thought they could only do 2 jobs a day. I had to go one by one with them, and I just took them out and I said, you're not going to do anything. You're just going to watch. And I'd knock out 4 jobs and get on the phone and call for a 5th one. And then at the end of the day, I said, okay, you've seen me do 5. Can you do 2? Can you do 4? And just had to call them to task. And so it took me 6 months to weed out a lot of the challenges, and some people needed to be fired and replaced, and then those people needed to be trained so that they could come and support the ideology. And this isn't something just as small as a little company doing internet service. These guys are coming in to take over the FBI, the DOJ, and this goes further than just a desire to be lazy. These are people who are corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just fighting laziness; they're fighting ideology. And
as
so it's
evidenced by, say again.
So it's going to take a while. We need to
Yes.
give these people a little bit of time to get their feet wet. I mean, the election was last year. They took over in January. Trump did, and now we've got appointees who have only been there for a month or so. So you got to give them a little time to get their feet wet, get in the middle of it before we start calling for their heads to be chopped off. And we're seeing a lot of people that are saying, well, we need to get rid of them right now. Well, Give them 6 months. If this is still happening a year from now, cry. But right now, take a deep breath.
Let's see what they're doing.
Let's see
Yeah,
what they're
I
doing.
think I do think that there's been some expectations established by the administration, like with the release of the Epstein files, and that was kind of a joke. Um, but we'll see what happens, as you say. And by the way, just as I'll take a minute here, if I may, to explain something. I wrote an article for Uncover DC back in 21, maybe I think it was 2020. And one of the other columnists at Uncover DC was ex-Navy intelligence. And he sends me an email. He says, "Hey, I want you to meet this guy. He's an ex-CIA undercover guy. He's the real deal. I've known him for years. And he read your article and he's got some comments for you." So I said, "Yeah, put him in touch with me." So the guy, ex-CIA op, undercover, covert op guy, 20 years. I had written about contact tracing. If you
Hmm.
remember all the money we spent on that, creating to find out, to track you, and what it was, a elaborate training that went on in the state, and all of a sudden it just disappeared. But the system's still operational, still authorized. But anyways, he says, "You are so far over the target, you don't know how exactly over the target you are.
Hmm.
I have some stuff to share with you, but I will not do it on a video call or a phone call. It's either face to face or nothing at all." And so we paid to have him come to Idaho, and he actually stayed with me in my house for 3 days. What a lesson, what a learning that I got as he explained to me what goes on, why the deep state operates and stays so deep. And just in real brief here, law states, let's say you and I are officials with the CIA or the FBI, because it works for both. Actually, he said the top three layers of every agency in the federal government is corrupt, is beyond compare. Here's why. If you do something wrong, let's say you're an FBI director of some level, senior manager, and you decide, you know what, I'm going to take my wife and my kids. We're going to go down to the Bahamas and we're going to schedule a government plane so we have to buy tickets. We'll take a government plane down. We'll spend the week in the Bahamas and come back. Okay, that's against the law. You can't do that. But let's say you do it anyways. By law, you have to be written up. It has to be a report written. So what do? They have a laptop that is not connected to the internet. And they take a thumb drive and they put it in and they write you up on a Word document that is never saved. So it's not even on the hard drive of the laptop, or it's not even on the thumb drive. They then print that document out on a piece of paper, and then they smash the thumb drive. So they can't, no possible way to track any of this stuff electronically. But there is now a written report documenting that you violated the law, blah, blah, and that goes in your file. So now they followed the law, and you've been written up for this egregious error that you took. And the thing is that he says the top three levels of all these agencies, everybody has dirt on everybody, because he calls it Vault One, internal issues in these agencies. He says all those reports go into Vault One, and there actually is a physical vault, and there's somebody who is guarding those vaults. So if they want to do blackmail, they can go, "Hey, you know what? You're not voting the way that we want you to, or you're not doing what we want you to. We're going to go pull out that piece of paper that you got written up. We're going to, do you want this to become public? No? Okay, then do what we tell you to do, or vote the way we want you to vote." So this is why these FBI agents were going after J6 people, which was a joke. It was totally. Can you believe that we're paying other Americans to prosecute people illegally? Why were they doing that? Except for they didn't want to get their dirt publicized. So it's bribery. It's extortion. So he says, Vault One is everybody in organizations in the government. He says Vault Two is famous people who are not in the government, movie stars, rock stars. Okay, there's all these people get involved in some sexual whatever, and they're being tracked by the FBI, and that all gets written up. The person doesn't even know about it, but the FBI has all that stuff written up as to what happened where, and that's Vault Two. So if they want some movie star or rock star to say or do something, then we want you to say that. I don't want to do that. Well, then they go, "Oh, looky here, we got this on you. Do you want this to go public?" "No, gosh, no." Okay, well, then you're going to say what we want you to say.
Yeah. And I think this goes all the way back to the Prohibition era.
Yes. And this guy sat in my den and we talked, and I took extensive notes. And this is what needs to change. So when you have Kash Patel and Dan Bongino trying to clean house, you've got everybody's got dirt on everybody. To go through all this stuff takes time.
And I believe, and don't hold me to this. I believe it was in the, and I only saw a little blurb, a little clip. I haven't had a chance to watch the whole thing. It was Joe Rogan and Elon Musk, their last interview. I believe it was out of that I think it was Elon Musk that said that that's what's happening right now, trying to get even the Epstein files, is that they can't even figure out where the computer is, the laptop.
Bingo.
And all of those things, it's been bounced from agency to agency to agency to agency, vault to vault to vault, and so there's this big shell game, and it's just getting moved around. They think, because they don't even know where it's at. And quote,
Think
end
about
quote,
think
they don't
about
know where it
this.
is.
So let's say you got some famous judge, might be on the Supreme Court, who did some things he shouldn't have done. His name's in the Epstein files. Does he want his name out there? No. Does he have pull and sway politically? Yes. You can say, make sure that that paper never makes the light of day,
Yep.
or I've got dirt on you, and I'm holding you accountable to make sure my paper never comes out.
And
That's
this
what we're
is
doing.
and this is a challenge. If you release those files, then immediately everybody knows who you're coming after, and those people then they can leave the country. They can do all sorts of things before the prosecutorial process starts. So if I'm Bondi, if I'm Patel, if I'm Bongino, and I'm trying to root out corruption, and I'm going to bring charges, I'm not releasing anything right now. I'm holding everything as close as I possibly can, and I'm putting together my case. And then all of a sudden, arrests are going to start being made, and then those files are coming out. That's the order I would put it out, and I would hope that they would use that kind of discernment before they do things. So when you're dealing with this level of corruption, and now they're trying to hide all the evidence, you can't even get your hands on the laptop. You can't get your hands on even the list anymore. You can't get your hands on all the evidence because these people don't want that to come forward. They've got to deal with that first so they can put their case together. And so I think like Elon Musk said, if he even started going after a more than a small percentage of the corruption, they would just kill him. And those were his words. And that's the level of the deep state.
Julian Assange said it. He said, if it were all to come out, 98% of Washington would disappear.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I am too. But think about you think about your life, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're the head of an agency appointed by Trump and you're a secretary in the cabinet and you want to clean house, there are people who are so deeply embedded in the corruption that have no qualms about killing you if you expose them. Now you're dealing with that kind of stuff. Where do you draw the line, like our founding fathers did, about our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor? They were willing to lay down their life.
Yeah,
Are the people who are now appointed to these offices who want to clean up, are they willing to lay down their life?
and that's a big ask.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems
It's
so
that,
simple.
but it's
easy to
that
say,
corrupt.
oh, yeah, I would lay mine down until you're there.
It's
Until
that
you're there.
corrupt.
And then all of a sudden you think, well, okay, I'll lay my life down, but what does that do to the rest of my family?
Well,
If I've
and
got
that's the other
children
thing.
at home, what's the effects
Yeah.
on them?
We're not going to hurt you. We're just going to take your kids.
Yep.
And you will not like the pain that they have to endure. Yeah, the corruption is so deep, which is why let's kind of we wrap up the show a little bit. We're going for an hour here,
Oh, yeah.
or almost an hour. But the original intent, right? Let's go back to Idaho. You've got people who are in groups who are solid conservative Christians who understand the principles that were establishing this country and this state. And then you've got those who will claim that, but not practice it. And then you got people who will go this place too, will know that it's a 4-to-1 advantage in this state for Republicans. For every registered Democrat in Idaho, there are 4 registered Republicans. We have a very red constituency.
Hmm.
And if someone wants to get elected, the real elections in Idaho happen in the primaries.
That's right.
So if you can win the primary, you're going to win the general. Okay, so I got to win the primary. If you can convince your district to vote for you in the primary and you run as a Republican and you say all the right words, you'll get in. And they say all the right words because even the Democrats have learned that if I want to get elected in Idaho, I've got to run as a Republican.
And a lot of them have, and a lot of them have got elected as a
Yes.
Republican. The
Yes.
Magic Valley, we had to weed a lot of them out of there. Lansing was one of them. Just as an example, if you go and you look at their voting records, you find out in a real hurry they're not Republicans. They are absolutely not Republicans.
Yes.
They might be blue dog Democrats, like my grandfather was,
Does I define blue dog because a lot of folks don't know that term.
they lean a lot more. They're more they're conservative as far as like what their feelings would have been with the LGBTQ movement. He would not have been in favor of that whatsoever. But they would vote for your entitlements, welfare, those types of things. So fiscally, they were a little bit more of, hey, it's okay to dip into your pocket if it's for the greater good.
Mhm.
And so you saw a lot of that. That's how I would probably they're a lot more to the center, a lot more to the right than the Democrats that we see today. In fact, they would probably call them Republicans today.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. So,
so,
but the term used to be in vogue 40 years ago. It's not in vogue anymore. That's why I asked you to explain it.
yeah, yeah. So that would be my definition. Yeah, you correct me if I'm missing the mark a little bit there, but they were a lot more right than the Democrats of today. And so you see a lot of them that are getting elected and they're calling themselves Republicans so that they can get in office. But if you look at their voting record, they are certainly not conservatives, and they will spend your money without giving it a second thought.
No, it really is appalling to me, which is why I really like the pledge that certain conservative Republicans had adhered themselves to. They said, yeah, we're going to take this pledge that no was a maximum growth rate of 1.6%. There was some small percentage of growth because they want to try to keep government small.
Mm-hmm.
The bigger the government gets, the more they control our lives. And if we're going to be a free country, we can't have the government controlling our lives.
And
It's
on
amazing
that
to me.
note,
Yeah, go ahead.
um, just want a little side note. There were over 3,000 bills I found out yesterday that were penned in this last legislative session in Idaho. Now, before they didn't all get into committee, they didn't be brought before committees, and they didn't all get kicked out. But they started with, I think it was over 3,000 bills. Is that smaller government?
Well, it always depends on what the bill's about, but because some bills are about trying to reduce the size of the government.
Yeah.
What really bothers me is the number of people who are criticizing the Idaho Freedom Foundation
Yes.
because you've got a couple of agencies, organizations in the state that rate bills and give legislators ratings. IACI is one of them, the Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry. Your business cannot be a member. My business cannot be a member. Why? We're not a big business, right? You have to be this big business. It's all big businesses, even international businesses, are part of IACI if they have a presence in Idaho. So,
Including Meta, which is
yeah,
Facebook's parent company, by the way, folks.
right. And they're grading bills. And here's how the IACI grading system works. If you vote in alignment with what IACI wants, you get a point. If you vote in opposition of what IACI wants, they take away a point. And that's how they grade their legislators. Okay. The Idaho Freedom Foundation has a rubric of I don't know how many questions where they're asking, and they don't rate all the bills, but does the bill grow government? Does it enhance government powers, right? And it goes through and has a very objective, and their team looks at the bills and they answer those questions, they discuss them, and they give the bill a rating based on these very objective questions that anybody can go find online if they go to the Idaho Freedom Foundation website.
And
It's all there.
you could really just wrap those criteria up as just a better definition of Does it expand freedom or does it limit your freedom? And on
Right.
the other side, does it expand spending or does it decrease spending?
And does it expand big government
Big
or big
government or reduce big
advantages to
government?
big
Yep.
corporations? Yeah. Which is what's basically what it boils down to. So I'm really saddened to see people criticizing IFF and the people who run IFF. And it's like, look what they're trying to do versus what IACI's trying to do. And so I'm looking at these Idaho Freedom Foundation scores on some of they're doing a very good job of putting out the information for us. We got leaders in our legislature in Idaho whose spending scores are worse, as you and I would look at them, worse than some Democrats.
Yes.
They're bigger spenders than some Democrats are. And yet they're in leadership positions in our conservative legislature. No, this is not how it's supposed to be operating. So yeah, we got a huge problem. And the more that we can get that information out there and educate people, the better off we're going to be. But
And
I say stop criticizing IFF.
amen. Yeah. Well, I would say criticize them if it's due diligence. If you've done
Yes,
your due
absolutely.
diligence and you've looked into it and you actually know what you're talking about, and you're not just upset because they criticize somebody that you like. There's a lot of people in our legislature that I like that I'm not happy with right now.
Exactly.
And so if somebody were to criticize one of them, you need to first ask your question before you say, well, do I like the person that's being criticized or not? Do I like the way that they've been acting in the past? Am I friends with them, or do I normally agree with them? And if that answer is yes, then all of a sudden the criticism is wrong. You need to stop doing that and say, well, okay, first of all, let's go look and see if that criticism is valid or not.
Yes.
And if that criticism
Are
is
you married?
valid, then
You're married.
You need to put your feelings away.
You're married. Do you agree with your wife on everything?
No.
And yet you
Most of
stay
the time,
married.
I will say, most of the time I can honestly say that.
Right.
But
Same thing with IFF, right? I do not agree with all their positions. I don't. I've got criticism for some of their positions. That doesn't mean I say write them all off because of that. No, there's one thing, this thing over here, that thing over there. I don't agree with you guys on that. But overall, they're doing a great work for the state, and people should take a look at what they're doing objectively without, as you were just describing, what I think a team mentality. I'm going to praise everything my team does and criticize everything the other team does, which is what we've devolved into. And I say that word very carefully, devolved into in this country and in this state. Democrat, Republican, whatever. We need to get out of that mindset.
yeah, yeah. Well, and you see that. I mean, sometimes we're more critical of our own team when it comes to football or baseball. We'll criticize the owners. We'll criticize the players. We'll criticize all of that. But then when it turns around to our political teams, we're like, oh, don't you dare.
Mm.
And we need to realize that we're not on a political team. We're on Team USA, and I'll leave it at that.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
So
great way to wrap up. And since this is the turn, if you're just joining us, by the way, maybe you missed the first part of the show. I'm Daniel Bobinski. I'm talking to Shane Klaas. This is the Transition Podcast, where I'm passing the torch. I was the founder of True Idaho News, have been the chief editor of True Idaho News, and God is calling me into other things. And I'm passing the torch to Shane because I think he's the best person. And we talked and he said yes and said, cool. So here is the torch being passed to you, Shane. It is your gig. I'll let you close the show.
thank you, Daniel. And I am looking forward to more and more of these. I really hope I think we ought to do this once a week. And we'll talk off camera and see if that's possible and what we can do there. But we talked right beforehand and said that maybe Wednesday mornings would be a good time to do that. So we'll kind of figure out what day is going to work out best and maybe try that on for a little while and see what it goes. But at the very least, I want your face to be a staple here, and I am dedicated to continuing on the True Idaho News platform that you've created, just expanding that and helping to take over the management. And so those of you that are watching, thank you for putting up with us for the last, I guess it's been about an hour and 5 minutes going on here. And no doubt we're gonna hit the stop streaming and probably say, doggone it, I wish we would have had this part of the conversation on the stream, just like we have every other time that we've done this. But but thanks, everybody, and get out there and do something. Get active, get involved. Don't be a bench warmer when it comes to politics. Right now, our country needs active people who are paying attention, and contact your, if you're in the Boise area, a good place to start. Make a phone call to Mayor McClean and tell her